What's going on, everybody? Shout out to all my Klingons and Vulcans out there. I see you Romulans in the back. You are now tuned in to the Legacy YouTube channel, the planetary headquarters for all of your celestial information. And today we are doing another episode of Dun Dun Dun, the Forbidden Scrolls. We're going to take a dive into some gnarly documents right now. You might have heard of them. It's called Analysis and Assessment of the Gateway Process. Some super secret squirrel stuff. You have to be a CIA agent to know it. If I tell you about it, I'm going to have to kill you. Not really, just jokes, people. But we're going to have fun with it tonight. We're going to dive deep, try to dissect it. This may be one of the first times I've read it. I might have gone over this when I was in high school. I got to get a refresher, but we're going to dive into it. I hope you guys enjoy the ride. Before we do jump into it, I do want to remind you guys, if you're not already subscribed to the channel, hit that subscribe button so you're up to date with all the celestial broadcasts. And without further ado, let the tinfoil hat get adjusted on the cranium. You know the most about this, so nice. Give a little background.
This one's been a long time coming. I'm very excited to get into it. We're reading something released by the Department of the Army, CIA. It is Analysis and Assessment of Gateway Process. It is basically the U.S. military's attempt at narrowing down a streamlined workflow for astral projection and remote viewing. Believe it or not, no joke, the CIA actually does practice remote viewing. There are people who remote view for a living. The CIA had a program called Project Stargate, which has apparently run on for decades now. And you can find interviews with people talking about what they do, finding hostages, terrorists, that kind of stuff. But in the 80s, this guy was tasked with compiling as much information as he could to actually streamline the process that could normally take someone decades of practice working, like, as a monk in a monastery or something like that. But the idea is to actually find practical methods to be able to do this and train soldiers how to do it within a short period of time, like a few weeks, a month or two, something like that. So that's what we got here.
Yeah, so before we get into reading this document, I just want to give a short primer on who made the gateway process. What are they talking about? Is that a CIA? Did the CIA make a remote viewing thing called the gateway process? Did the secret UFO program, psionic teams, did they make the gateway process? What is the gateway process? So the gateway process was something developed by a man named Robert Monroe. And quick background on him, let's see, he was born in 1915, and he grew up actually as a sort of businessman in the radio broadcasting space. And then it was later on in his life, I think he was like close to 50 years old, when he had his first couple spontaneous out-of-body experiences. If you don't know what that is, go look it up, because we're already deep in the rabbit hole. So look up the term out-of-body experience and then come back. So yeah, this is he started having these spontaneous experiences, and he ended up writing a book. He ended up writing 3 books, but the first one was called Journeys Out of the Body, and that came out in 1971. It looks like, and that was already like, that could have been, I think that was close to even 10 years after his first experiences started occurring. So he didn't write that book right away. It was within a couple years of his first experiences. And he wanted to he didn't have like an esoteric background. So he wanted to, he took a very Western view on assessing the abilities and what could be done without a body. And of course, he also wondered, can I train other people to do this? And what does the brain look like when I'm actually in this state? And so he ended up setting up an institute that's now known as the Monroe Institute, and it has become a sort of staple in the consciousness field, because what this is a modern individual who starts having these experiences spontaneously rather than some esoteric, philosopher, yogi, magician just coming in and being like, I can do this psychic thing. And so that was pretty weird. And the process that he set up, called the gateway process, also used something called like binaural beats and a form of technology to try and get your brain into hemisync, which is what he observed when the left and right brain hemispheres are in a specific sort of working together. There's I think that's a medical term. They call it hemisync. So there's like a tandem of left brain, right brain working together. And when you're in that state, that's associated with this higher, I guess, altered states of consciousness as a gateway access point. So that's the gateway into the out of body experience. And he's running this institute, claiming he can teach people how to do this. So naturally, the CIA, which already has remote viewing programs, comes in and they want to do an analysis. So this is what the CIA analyzed on Robert Monroe's program. So pretty unique. The gateway process itself is not made by the CIA. It's made by Robert Monroe.
I'm really glad you clarified that. Because
and it was the Army intelligence that was investigating the Monroe Institute. And when they found this information, the intelligence officer gave this report that we're reading to the CIA. So that's what we're reading right now.
That's why it says Department of the Army at the top. Okay.
Yes.
U.S. Army Intelligence and Security Command, Fort George Meade, Maryland. All right. Well,
but when I was in high school, and fittingly enough, yes, I was wearing only 1-ply back then. Now I'm at 3-ply, so I'm a veteran. But I stumbled across this through the whole binaural beats hemisync. I was listening to this on my iPod back in the day, and with the one with the wheel, before touchscreens, and
I had one of those.
I had the headphones in and I was playing the left and right, and I was meditating to that. I can't say that led me directly to out of body experiences, but it did lead me to having lucid dreams and having some gnarly dreams during that entire event, you could say. That's kind of how I understand this subject. I'm just talking about this from an outsider because I haven't read this before, but yeah, that's what I know of the Monroe Institute. I do know that some people consider the Monroe Institute an actual CIA front because I guess they derive a lot of their funds from the CIA. They have a lot of federal funding, and that's an interesting note right there. But
interesting. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if the CIA wanted to be very involved in the Institute at a leadership level, just to kind of see what's going on.
At it.
However, I know that I want to say publicly that I haven't visited the Monroe Institute myself, but my understanding is that they've always kept a very sort of close, they want people to be sincere. They know that this is not just accepted. They don't advertise heavy to try and make as much money as possible to get as many people through their course as they can. So I don't think it's an accurate representation to say that this has been compromised by government agents. But what D-Bake is getting to is that obviously there's conspiracies because this is the holy grail of these secret programs is can we turn someone into a psychic super soldier? Can we train them to go out of body and then they can go stop someone's heart when they're out of body, that type of stuff. So of course they're interested. Of course they try to gain influence, but at the end of the day, I don't think we can just say that, the whole institute's been compromised or something like that. I've heard a lot of good experiences from people that go there and have some of their first experiences by, having the intention to learn from the program and be among other people and get advice from other people who have actually accomplished the process. So that's what it is.
That's cool. Yeah, I have not listened to the Gateway tapes, but that's on my to-do list. I want to see if I can actually hone in on those skills. And I got my tinfoil hat on. I'm ready to dive right into it.
Yeah, this is going to be gnarly. I'm excited. And this is around the same time they were doing gnarly stuff. The CIA, the NSA, all the intelligence organizations. They were dabbling in acid and all. This is only 83. This is 3 years out of the 70s. Like,
Yeah, they were going wild around that time. They probably still are. Imagine the programs we don't know about.
the MK Ultra Manchurian Candidate, all that stuff. Like,
Yeah.
can you mind control people? Can you brainwash somebody so that they can not know who they are, hear a sound like blue rabbit whale, and then snap in, like, assassinate the Russian president, you know? Like, so
Sure.
they're trying to militarize these tactics. So they probably saw this from a spiritual community and was like, how
Well,
can we militarize it?
now the
How can we weaponize
MK
it?
Ultra,
Yeah.
the dates that I see on that were 1953 start. Officially, it was officially continued until 1973, when CIA Director Richard Helms ordered the destruction of most records related to the program.
What was
Yeah.
the
So
cause?
this report is 1983. So I think we're kind of past, like, I think everyone kind of knew how insane and nutty it had gotten, that specific program of MK Ultra, and so this is kind of like 10 years after that saga, where they're like, probably what maybe they got it out of their system. They're like, okay, we went ham on the psychic stuff, but now we're kind of honing in. Let's just focus on remote viewing, psionics for UAPs, and this out of body stuff. Like,
Yeah,
maybe like
now-
a little bit of a, come back to
now
our senses.
there are those that
They kept
claim,
doing it. They just kept it secret.
Yeah, there are those that claim that the MK Ultra program has lived on through what's called Project Monarch, but that
Monarch. I was just going to say
is
that.
a
I think it's
conspiracy for
harder,
another
though.
time.
It's harder. It's a little harder to do something that wild, just because it brought a lot of attention to basically like scandalous, like use of funding and sources, and like
That's
inhumane
true.
things. So I guess you could argue that, it just means that inhumane, weird psychic programs just get pushed deeper into black projects, so that they are less likely to see the light of day. But I also think it means that, like, people that run these programs kind of like, look, if we want to keep this stuff secret, like, we can't go ham with a large program that's going to get revealed later. Like, it's got to be kosher. And so the deeper you take it into those programs, I also think, in a way, there's a different type of professionalism as well that can, I would argue, can occur. And also just the world that we live in is, I think it's not as easy to get away with that stuff. I'm not saying there aren't crazy conspiracies that are true. But it's like when you were growing up as a kid, you were allowed to kind of have more free reign, where nowadays everything is more managed. It's made safer. So
The intelligence agencies were definitely a lot more reckless back in the good old days. I think they've reeled it in for sure.
Old days when you can smack a Kennedy in the face in front of everybody and not get charged. All right, let's jump into this shit. Yeah,
let's jump right into it. All right. 2 Commander, U.S. Army Operational Group, Fort Meade, Maryland, 20755. You tasked me to provide an assessment of the Gateway experience in terms of its mechanics and ultimate practicality. As I set out to fulfill that tasking, it soon became clear that in order to assess the validity and practicality of the process, I needed to do enough supporting research and analysis to fully understand how and why the process works. Frankly, sir, that proved to be an extremely involved and difficult business. Initially, based on conversations with a physician who took the Gateway training with me, I had recourse to the biomedical models developed by Itzik Bintov to obtain information concerning the physical aspects of the process. Then I found it necessary to delve into various sources for information concerning quantum mechanics in order to be able to describe the nature and functioning of human consciousness. I had to be able to construct a scientifically valid and reasonably lucid model of how consciousness functions under the influence of the brain hemisphere synchronization technique employed by a Gateway. Once this was done, the next step involved recourse to theoretical physics in order to explain the character of the time-space dimension and the means by which expanded human consciousness transcends it in achieving Gateway's objectives. Finally, I again found it necessary to use physics to bring the whole phenomenon of out-of-body states into the language of physical science to remove the stigma of its occult connotations and put it in a frame of reference suited to objective assessment.
wow. Sounds like he's like chilling with the New Agers, but he's like an intelligence officer and has to
Right.
like reword everything he's just gone through. He's like, I'm with the hippies. I love this shit, but I got to
Sitting around the
reword it
campfire.
so the officers won't think
Yeah.
I'm crazy.
It sounds like he himself had an out of body experience, and then he was like, "Wait, if like I gotta go explain that to my superiors, and like they're not gonna. I can't just tell them like, yeah, I got to the vibrational stage, and I separated from my body, and I rolled out of my body, and you know I flew in the sky."
You can tell he's trying to sound as professional as
He's
possible.
like,
Oh, yeah.
it was so sick. It was all in my mind.
Yeah.
Officers are gonna be like, what?
Well, no, I think he's probably like he's like they're gonna think it's just in my mind. Like, how do I prove to them that it wasn't? Oh, I gotta tell them the science. I gotta explain it.
Yeah.
I gotta get quantum into it. I gotta get quantum
Oh, yeah,
physics.
hold up. You need to go learn quantum physics real quick.
I consulted with professionals.
I will say, I mean, freaking props to this guy. I have a feeling this document is gonna be like a solid read. Like, it's not just gonna be some debunker being like, it's not real, F that, you know, psychic things aren't real. I think it's gonna be like based.
It is based. It goes deeper than you're expecting.
Yeah.
It sounds like he believes it.
Yeah.
You can already tell in the first paragraph. It's like, oh shit. I need to,
That's why I say he's like,
figure this out.
He's like, as I said, it soon became clear, you know, sounds like after he realized it was real, it became clear he had to put in a lot of work to explain how it can be happening.
Yeah.
All right. I began the narrative by briefly profiling the fundamental biomedical factors affecting such related techniques as hypnosis, biofeedback, and transcendental meditation so that their objectives and mode of functioning could be compared in the reader's mind with the gateway experience as the model of its underlying mechanics was developed. Additionally, that introductory material is useful in supporting the conclusions of the paper. I indicate that at times these related techniques may provide useful entry points to accelerate movement into the gateway experience. Niels
What's
Bohr.
funny is if this was like, he was like an intelligence officer, just straight physical thinking, military thinking, non-spiritual. And then through this investigation that he was tasked with, he had a spiritual awakening.
Oh yeah, his mind was open.
And he's like, oh shit.
And then he found the Urantia book.
Wow.
Okay, you don't need to add your fan
ride off
fiction
into
in
the
here.
sunset. They ride off into the sunset, kissing on rainbows. Yeah.
What we're talking about is the other book that we read in this channel called the Urantia book, and there's nothing in that book which specifically, well, there's only a minor hint in that book that supports something like this being possible, and so
A couple.
yeah, just a couple, but it's really not enough to, I think people still relegate this to like, oh, God made it happen to me. You know, if you're religious, where it's like, oh, the spirit moved me and then I was out of my body, where it's like, can you just realize that you have this ability, just like God gave you the ability to walk. It's your own power. He gave this to you because you have a cosmic mind. You have a body, you have an energy body. You can do psychic things, but you never tried. You didn't believe it was possible. And so you're just blaming it on other things. Like, this is a natural ability. You do not have to be religious. You're not better at this if you're religious. Yeah, we can all do it. It's just it's a question of your worldview. Would you ever try?
And you know what's wild? A lot of the stuff we've been listening to lately with the whistleblowers like Jake Barber basically states psionics and remote viewing is a requirement for contact with these non-human intelligence, which is one of the reasons why we're reading this now of all times. Is pretty timely to everything kind of going on. All right, I'll continue. Niels Bohr, the renowned physicist, once responded to his son's complaints about the obtuse nature of certain concepts in physics by saying, "You are not thinking, you are merely being logical." The physics of altered human consciousness deals with some conceptualizations that are not easily grasped or visualized exclusively in the context of ordinary left-brained linear thinking. So, to borrow Dr. Bohr's mode of expression, parts of this paper will require not only logic, but a touch of right-brain intuitive insight to achieve a complete, comfortable grasp of the concepts involved. Nevertheless, once that is done, I am confident that their construction and application will stand up to the test of rational critique.
Damn. That's dope.
Intuition.
So Niels Bohr is the the discoverer of the atomic structure. So when you look at that
That's
atomic
right.
structure, that's
The
Niels
Bohr model. Yeah.
the standard
okay.
model.
Paradoxically, having gone to such great lengths to avoid trying to render judgments based on an occult or dogmatic frame of reference, in the end, I found it necessary to return, at least briefly, to the question of the impact of the gateway experience on common belief systems. I did so because, although it was essential to avoid attempting to render an assessment in the context of such systems, I felt that it was necessary, after having completed the analysis, to point out that the resulting conclusions do not do any violence to the fundamental mainstream of either Eastern or Western belief systems. Unless that point is clearly established, the danger exists that some people will reject the whole concept of the gateway experience in the mistaken belief that it contradicts and is therefore alien to all that they hold to be right and true.
Wow.
This study is certainly not designed to be the last word on the subject, but I hope that the validity of its basic structure and of the fundamental concepts upon which it is based will make it a useful guide for the USA INSCOM personnel who are required to take the gateway training or work with gateway materials. All right. Does anyone know what that stands for?
USA INSCOM. No, I'd say USA Intelligence
Command?
something command. Yeah. What's INS? Internal. I don't know. Intelligence. Naval. I don't know.
I think I'm about to get it. United States Army Intelligence and Security Command.
No,
Okay.
shit.
Okay.
Damn.
Yeah,
So
COM means
community within
command.
Army.
Signed, Wayne McDonald.
I mean, that's interesting. He's
Commander.
predicting that some personnel are gonna be required to take the gateway training and work with the materials.
Yeah, this is very real.
I like what he said before that, point 4, where he knows that, like, look, there's gonna be some religious people when they read my report, and they're gonna want to try and write it off because it doesn't agree with their belief system, and that's why he says that straight up. You know, like, look, this doesn't destroy your belief system. If it's possible, it actually fits into both Eastern and Western. You know, pump the brakes, chill out.
Yeah.
And this also kind of ties into that missing paper, because we'll get into the lore later, but there's one of the papers they did not release with this entire document for a specific reason. And then later the Monroe Institute itself did release the full version with that missing paper. And that paper dealt specifically with the different religious attitudes and how this pertains to that. So it's almost like they didn't want that out for some reason.
Yeah, it's weird because he provided a good reason why that comparing it to different religions is actually a valuable thing to do, because it doesn't conflict with Eastern or Western thought. All right, I think I'm good. All right, who wants to pick up the introduction? Quick little thing.
I got it. The gateway experience. It's brain hemisphere synchronization in perspective. Number 1, introduction. In order to describe the Monroe Institute technique for achieving altered states of consciousness, the gateway experience, involving brain hemisphere synchronization, or hemisync, the most effective way to begin is to briefly profile the basic mechanics which underlie the operation of related methods such as hypnosis, transcendental meditation, and biofeedback. It is easiest to effectively describe what gateway is by beginning with a short description of those associated techniques that share some common aspects with the gateway experience, but which are nevertheless different. In this way, we can develop a frame of reference at the outset, which will provide useful concepts to explain and understand gateway by comparison as we proceed. Hypnosis. According to the theories of psychologist Ronald Stone and the biomedical engineering models of Itzhak Bentov, hypnosis is basically a technique which permits acquisition of direct access to the sensory motor cortex and pleasure centers, and lower cerebral emotional portion and associated pleasure centers of the right side of the human brain, following successful disengagement of the stimulus screening function of the left hemisphere of the brain. Interesting. The left hemisphere of the brain is the self-cognitive, verbal, and linear reasoning component of the mind. It fulfills the function of screening incoming stimuli by categorizing, assessing, and assigning meaning prior to allowing passage to the right hemisphere of the brain. The right hemisphere, which functions as the non-critical, holistic, nonverbal, and pattern-oriented component of the brain, appears to accept what the left hemisphere passes to it without question. Consequently, if the left hemisphere can be distracted either through boredom or through reduction to a soporific semi-sleep state, external stimuli, to include hypnotic suggestions, are allowed to pass unchallenged into the right hemisphere, where they are accepted and acted upon directly. The result.
I just looked up the definition of soporific because I didn't.
Yeah, I've never heard that word before. I was about to stop and be like, I've never heard that word before.
I'm
and I
smart.
know
I know what it means.
It is. Taylor.
Oh, do you?
It is.
What's it mean?
Tending. Yeah. What does it mean, Taylor?
I bet I can
Liar.
figure out the meaning based on the context.
Oh, liar.
Soporific.
Something about wisdom.
Okay.
Something about thinking,
Consequently, if
knowledge.
you're thinking of Socrates. Soporific. If the left hemisphere can be distracted either through boredom or through reduction to a soporific semi-sleep state. Yeah, it's like boring. Now look it up.
Yeah, it's tending to induce drowsiness or sleep. All right, I just had to look up that word.
Well, because we're doing a forbidden scroll, and this is what we're doing, we're going to take a little pause right there. And I guess if you want to show the people paper 49 of the Inhabited Worlds, 49.513.
What?
All right.
You're talking about the brain stuff already?
You found it?
Yep.
Cool. So this is a cool little passage that has to do with the different types of mortal planets, the different types of beings that are out there, and what type of brains they have. I talk about it a lot in all of the other videos and in the live stream, but pretty much if you cut open every animal's head, I know, a little morbid, I know, but if you cut open all the animals on planet Earth, if you cut open their skull, you'll see that their left and right hemisphere is equal. There's only one animal that when you cut open their head, their hemispheres are not equal. One's bigger than the other, and that's a human being. And if your left side is more developed than your right side, you're a little bit more logical. If your right side is more developed than your left side, you're a little bit more intuitive. Females tend to have bigger right hemispheres. Males tend to have bigger left hemispheres, but it could be vice versa. It doesn't matter what type of body you're in. And both hemispheres can be, I don't know. I wonder who has the closest, most developed in sync hemispheres on the planet Earth, but whatever. That's for a different conversation.
I thought you were going to say out of the legacy boys, who's got the best hemispheres?
All right, let's size up.
When we all die, we'll write it in a charter, cut open our brains. And
No, we can do it. Neuralink can do it for us when we all get our first Neuralinks.
That's right.
Because we're going to sign up for the early program.
I'm going to throw you into the fucking
God.
fire.
You won't even need a computer. You'll be running
Dude, they can just hemi-sync for us. They can just blow.
You're fucking crazy. Don't listen to this man. No. Okay, so this is from the Oriental book, and just knowing that, so you have two hemispheres of the brain, and there's a corpus callosum, a big chunk of flesh, brain matter that connects the two, and it allows them to, the bridge allows them to sync up. So this is from the Oriental book, what I consider the highest, most detailed classification of extraterrestrial beings known to mankind. And they are talking about the different brain types of the different types of, I guess you could say, humanoid species. There's other humanoids out there. Crazy, huh? All right. Brain types. I always say this. I say that I've asked you guys this before. Like, I'm asking the people who are watching this. Just something to think about if you haven't thought about it yet. When the ETs land, like I said, when they land, what would be more trippy? If when they came out and they were like a squid being with goo and crazy eyes and teeth, but they were intelligent? Or what would trip you out more is if when they walked off the ship, they look exactly like a human.
Oh my God.
That would fuck with your head, right?
I'm expecting.
Wait, what? So, something to chew on with your brain mouth. So getting into this, the Urantia book, brain type series. The one physical uniformity of mortals is the brain and nervous system. Nevertheless, there are three basic organizations of the brain mechanism: the 1, the 2, and the 3 brain types. Urantia is the word for earth. That's what the angels call earth. So Urantians would be somebody from earth. Urantians, us, are of the two-brained type, somewhat more imaginative, adventurous, and philosophical than the one-brain mortals, but somewhat less spiritual, ethical, and worshipful than the three-brained orders. These brain differences characterize even the pre-human animal existences. From the two-hemisphere type of Urantian cerebral cortex, you can, by analogy, grasp something of the one-brained type. The third brain of the three-brained orders is best conceived of as an evolvement of your lower or rudimentary form of brain, which is developed to the point where it functions chiefly in control of the physical activities, leaving the two superior brains free for higher engagements, one for intellectual functions and the other for spiritual counterparting activities of the thought adjuster. So just giving you a little bit of insight right there of what the Urantia transmissions say of how the brain setup is. And I want to get that mental picture in your guys' head before we move on in the reading this gateway process. Maybe these concepts will relate back to what we're talking about here.
Nice.
But I'm guessing the three brain type, they have more of a developed like amygdala. They have a more of a developed like animal brain. So it controls their fear, their flight and fight responses, and their eating and sexual urges. All that gets more condensed and kind of pushed out of the way. So now that they have more capacity for only developing and syncing the two hemispheres.
Nice. I'm glad you were able to somehow find a way to tie it in.
Would you call that Tremmy sync?
Sync. Yeah.
Hey, you want to know some crazy stuff? Side note. So we coined a term, actually a new philosophical system of thinking. It's called
The
triosophy.
Method.
The trisophic method, or the legatic method, because we're the legacy, one of the three. But it's triosophy, thinking in threes. And out of nowhere, who did I hear say this? I forget. I thought I heard someone say this, but no one uses this word triosophy. We looked it up. It's our word. It's what it is. It's our way of thinking. But there's another person that called it trinisophia, trinosophic knowledge. And that was Saint Germain, supposedly. Saint Germain, he coined that term. And I was like, oh interesting. Cool. It's kind of weird, right?
Okay.
So we got a connection with Saint Germain in a weird subconscious way.
Hell yeah.
All right. So keep on reading. Keep plowing ahead. All right. Where was I?
You were last reading about the
result.
Horrific, I think. Oh, yeah. The result.
The result may involve an emotional reaction originating in the lower cerebral region, sensory motor responses requiring movement of the cortex, and so on. Both the sensory and the motor cortices of the right cerebral portion of the brain contain a sequence of points known as the homunculus, which corresponds to points in the body. See Exhibit 1, next page. Stimulation of the corresponding area on the cortex causes an intermediate response in the associated portion of the body. Consequently, induction of the suggestion that the left leg is numb if it reaches the right hemisphere unchallenged and is referred to the appropriate area of the sensory cortex will result in an electrical reaction being generated that will induce the feeling of numbness. Interesting. Similarly, the suggestion that the person is experiencing a general feeling of happiness and well-being would be referred to the appropriate pleasure centers located in the lower cerebral portion or in the cortex of the right hemisphere, thereby inducing the suggested feeling of euphoria. Finally, suggestions such as one that informs the hypnotic subject that he enjoys enhanced concentration or powers of memory would be responded to in the right hemisphere by accessing unused information storage capacity normally held in reserve as a result of the left hemisphere selection and control processes. This aspect will become significant in the context of the gateway process when attention is given to examining the way that hypnosis may be used to accelerate progress in the early stages of the gateway experience.
Matrix loading room, get in a hypnotic state, and then somebody tells you you'll have memory powers, and then it like activates your natural ability for memory, but you're in an altered state, so you kind of like access it easier.
Okay.
A powerful tool. Brain is a powerful tool.
Interesting. And I wonder if this works better on people who don't have developed left hemispheres.
Hmm.
I do wonder, because I feel like I'm not easily put under hypnosis. I don't like following guided meditations. Maybe for that reason, because it's kind of difficult for me to follow when somebody's like talking in my ear, like telling you what to do. So
yeah.
So that's why they say, dumb people are easily influenced.
Yeah. Hypnosis of the media gets right to them.
That left brain ain't working, so that message gets transferred right to the right brain.
Yeah.
They should have mandatory tinfoil hats because they can't take the energies that are coming at them. They're gonna need that.
You're not allowed to watch TV until you can take it.
Start selling them on the Legacy store, like tinfoil baseball hats or something like that.
Dude, that'd be sick. All of our affiliates are lined with tinfoil.
10 layer tinfoil hat. Every year of their life, they can remove one more layer. Slow introduction, get them introduced to those brain waves.
It's like where you chart your kid's height as they grow on the wall, but like for your psychic powers, you can remove one ply.
Oh no, it's not. They're not. This isn't for people with getting psychic powers. This is for people who can't resist brainwashing at a young age.
Yeah, that's important.
Because they're too dumb. They need to shield their brains from getting brainwashed. We got Legacy tinfoil beanies coming soon.
Beanies, yeah, tinfoil lined beanies.
Yeah, go check those out. They might help you not get persuaded by Taylor Swift. Sorry, and Travis Kelce. So I had to say it because the Super Bowl right now.
Yeah,
So the Super Bowl's happening, and we're fucking recording this because we don't give a shit about that. Because the hypnosis, the big media hypnosis, we want to tell you the real shit.
All playing football, we're playing 5D chess, and you would much rather be influenced by Taylor Verser than Taylor Swift.
Do you wanna figure out what the most funny commercial is, or do you want to figure out that you can how to go out of body and know that you are more than your body and that you can go all these places? You can develop this ability. What do you want? If you're,
I know what I want. I think it's fitting since you're the meditation guy. You should probably pick up this transcendental meditation section coming up.
Oh sure, I'll read it, but I might do a thumbs down. I haven't needed transcendental meditation, but
you have other forms, more refined.
Well, I do. Yeah, we'll talk about that.
Okay.
Transcendental meditation. On the other hand, transcendental meditation works in a distinctively different fashion. In this technique, intense and protracted single-minded concentration on the process of drawing energy up the spinal cord ultimately results in what appears to be creation of acoustical standing waves in the cerebral ventricles, which are then conducted to the gray matter in the cerebral. Gotta scroll past these images.
I like this.
Bro got crazy with the dioramas.
we can go back.
I'm gonna need to look at those.
Conducted to the gray matter in the cerebral cortex on the right side of the brain. As a result, according to Bentov, these waves will stimulate and eventually polarize the cortex in such a way that it will tend to conduct a signal along the homunculus, starting from the toes and on up. The Bentov.
I feel it right now. When you said that, I felt it.
Yeah, honestly, I did not know transcendental meditation was using that spinal method. I have some stuff to say, but I'm going to finish this paragraph. The Bentov biomedical model, as described in a book by Lee Sinella, MD, entitled Kundalini Psychosis or Transcendence, states that the standing acoustical waves are the result of the altered rhythm of heart sounds, which are occasioned by prolonged practice of meditation and which set up sympathetic vibrations in the walls of the fluid-filled cavities which comprise the third and lateral ventricles of the brain. In addition, according to Bentov, the states of bliss described by those whose Kundalini symptoms have completed the full loop along the hemispheres may be explained as a self-stimulation of the pleasure centers in the brain caused by the circulation of a current along the sensory cortex. Bentov also notes that most of the described symptoms start on the left side of the body, meaning that is mostly a development occurring in the right hemisphere. Although normally a period of meditation involving intense concentration and practice for 5 years, or some is required to bring up the Kundalini. Bentov states that exposure to mechanical or acoustical vibrations in the range of 4 to 7 hertz for protracted periods may achieve the same effect. Bentov cites as an example repeated riding in a car whose suspension and seat combination produce that range of vibrations, or being exposed for long periods of time to these frequencies caused, for instance, by an air conditioning duct. He also notes that the cumulative effect of these vibrations may be able to trigger a spontaneous physio-Kundalini sequence in susceptible people who have a particularly sensitive nervous system.
I could tell your Kundalini was being activated as you were reading that.
Okay, wow. So, yeah, this is, I guess I've just never looked up transcendental meditation. I have a feeling, okay, I gotta look
Probably
this up.
different types.
Main
It's probably different
method
types of it. Yeah.
of,
I mean, that's years of practice.
but that's
Well, this-
specifically, that technique described is specifically the spinal breathing Kundalini stuff, where
Seems like just Kundalini meditation. Yeah.
yeah, where my understanding of transcendental meditation is this, what the AI is telling me. The main method of TM is a mantra-based meditation
Like jump
technique
up and down
that
like
involves,
this.
that's part of Kundalini thing, the process. That's one of the techniques. Transcendental meditation is a mantra-based meditation technique that involves silently repeating a specific sound, mantra, to help settle the mind into a deep state of relaxation and awareness. Okay. So, yeah, I mean,
We do it all the time.
that's interesting. I'm not sure why when this guy describes transcendental meditation, he focuses on the Kundalini technique or the spinal breathing. Maybe it's just, I bet there's like, of course, there's different sections. People take names and then they sort of apply different things. And there's all these different teachers who say they have the answer, and it gets taught one way in like the mainstream Western. Maybe it gets taught a little different in some things, but I mean, everything I read there was actually pretty interesting, because as I've talked about before, I've highly focused on a type of Kundalini practice that is held. The techniques are held in what's called Kriya Yoga, which is something that the Paramahansa Yogananda brought this specific practice to the West.
Okay.
And so that was even an obscure thing, I guess, that originated or was revived in something like the 17 to 1800s by this guy named Lahiri Mahasaya, who said that he got it from this immortal being, a human who had attained immortality through this technique.
Wow.
And yeah, they just call that name Babaji, which is a sort of a general name. So that's like a specific lineage called Kriya Yoga, and they basically Kundalini as a whole is talked about in the different some of the Indian texts. There's a specific one called Kundalini Upanishad, I think, where it's like a specific like primer on like how to prepare for that. And a lot of the yoga techniques are ideally preparing you for that. And so I got sort of introduced to that through the Kriya method, and it sort of claims to be, I guess, the most efficient and safe way to sort of activate the Kundalini experience. And again, I haven't tried all the other ways, but it seemed pretty safe, from my years of doing it. And I did not join any official organizations. I'm not under any agreements to not talk about what the techniques are. That is something that the official organizations will ask you to do, that you do not talk about the techniques. However, I was able to just use the people that decided to talk about the techniques and teach it, and write books. I was able to use that, to actually succeed with that method. And so I guess I'll just briefly explain that most of what he's saying here. Okay, specifically this spinal breathing thing. You focus on the spinal cord, and in the Kriya stuff, you focus on you do a breath, and you also focus the sensation on placing your awareness at the different centers in the body, starting at your like perineum, and then going up to like the 7 main locations, I guess, along the body, which some you could say are associated with chakras, but they're also associated with the different organ points. And so you do that, you bring it up the front of the body, and then you it sort of goes up and around, and then you bring it down the bottom. Now, when you start to do this, you don't actually feel anything. So you're kind of visualizing, you're kind of imagining, but the goal is not to visualize or imagine. It's to actually feel a sensation in your body. And it can, for me, it's actually the same sensation that you get if you're sensitive to ASMR. So I'm going to drop a weird prediction that I have, in that if anyone who's sensitive to ASMR and can get that tingle where they listen to the relaxing sounds and then you get this sort of tingle in your spine, you may have gotten this sensation. Yeah, the chills, part of that you could call that.
I get it. I have it right now.
Yeah. Anyone who has that sensitivity has this more sensitive nervous system, and they could use these methods to achieve success pretty fast. And that's based on my own experience, because there is a direct correlation with the ability to have ASMR stimulate the pleasure centers of the brain and this technique of the spinal breathing. And what happened was that I basically focused on that sort of electrical sensation, and it was most sensitive at the back of the neck. But as I did the breathing and the meditation technique, bringing the breath up and then down the back, the sensation turned into like something like thinner than a fishing line, a very thin sliver of electric feeling. And you most feel it at the back of the neck, but through this technique, you start to feel it down the entire spine. And slowly you're energizing, I guess, that electrical system, that specific sensation. And it's interesting because this is talking about that sensation. It's also relating this thing about like heart acoustics, and then
that's really interesting. Like a standing wave in your aorta or something, and it makes contact with fluid chambers in your brain.
Yeah. Now, I will say that, after some amount of years in with the Kriya stuff, if you're making progress with that or with any other Kundalini stuff, it will eventually turn into, instead of just an electrical sensation, it goes from an electrical sensation to being able to actually perceive a sort of magnetic sensation all around your body, which I assume is just some connection with the nervous system, maybe even like even just the ability to like feel the blood pumping through your body. But I would actually describe it as a type of sixth sense. It feels much more magnetic, and actually something that you could feel like by putting your hands over any part of your body. Now that was pretty later stage.
Right now.
Yeah. I mean, D-Bake has talked about it. He has that as well. But it's actually visceral. It's not visualization. It's not imagination. It is like a sixth sense that is like something about the biofield, or it feels electrical and magnetic. And that's one of the things. And then the other level that ended up kind of progressing into, in my experience, was that actually feeling the movement of the cerebral spinal fluid through the spine. And this also involves the usage of all the glands along the spine, sort of adding their, I feel like a biologist might, shoot me for, I don't know if they understand this as possible, but like
Who cares?
the gland, the explanation that I've heard from one of the other systems I was using was that it's actually the bladder that can intake secretions from some of the lower glands and actually stick them into like the base of the spine, and it sort of pulls it upward, and it adds it's like it supercharges that electrical sensation, and these glands that are now working in a sort of this source is called advanced yoga practices, and has a very Western mindset in explaining, what's happening. And it's very based. And I've also used the techniques from that to achieve progress as well. So, Magma, you were frozen there. So,
Back.
That source also basically explains that that you're starting to like use the gland systems in a sort of undiscovered biological way, that this is a sort of hidden biological process that modern biology does not really know about. And so, I can feel this sort of like the same way that you could feel the blood pumping through your veins. I can feel like the fluid pumping through my spine, and it's also associated with that electrical sensation. D-Bake, your
flag.
Your
Oh
flag.
no, my flag went down.
So maybe that means I'm saying too much here. But again, I'm just saying, like, this is open source data, open source information.
There's a life carrier behind him slapping it down like, no, the biology's all wrong. That's not possible.
Right. Yeah. I mean, to me, it's pretty simple. I read the descriptions of what was going to happen. I followed the techniques. It happened, and there's no pretending. There's no pretend about it. It's not like it's a very real, like, physical sensation, and it does seem to have correlations to out of body experiences and improving that. And that's a sort of separate topic. But I sort of got into that world at the same time, out of body experiences and those yoga techniques. I was sort of getting into that like at the same time. So I was able to kind of see how they were connected. And so, I think this is an interesting explanation on how it's working. But to the viewers out there, don't get too obsessed about the scientific explanations, because you're not going to convince people this is real from a scientific explanation. You got to go out there and get it for yourself. You prove it to yourself first, and then just I don't even try to prove this stuff to other people, because I know it's real from direct experience, and that changed my life. So that's my particular recommendation to the truth seekers out there. Don't try to convince people that something, that this weird thing is real. Just go do it and test the results, and don't get too caught in the muddle of guruology of the way that they set up these institutions to, try and teach you this. Like I said, open source information. Check out the Kriya books on Amazon. Check out Advanced Yoga Practices. If you do it, you do it. So shout out to all the killers out there, the spiritual adepts.
You want to take a quick look at some of these figures?
Yeah. Well, first off, I got some thoughts.
Okay.
You guys always moving on before I can fucking talk, assholes.
Let's hear it.
Yeah, you two gave your fucking monologues. I sit back, listen to you. Then moving on, fucking assholes. So,
let's hear what you have
this
to say about
definitely,
ASMR.
definitely. Oh shit, dude! Before I even figured out that was a thing, I was already deep in the game, bro. My hair stands up. I get chills, I get goosebumps for every damn thing that happens. Especially when synchronicities happen, and just when I get those thought transmissions,
spiritual chills.
Whatever, that's a whole different spirit. 100 spiritual chills to the max, constantly, my entire life, for sure. And that's a cool little thing, but that's a different episode. What you guys were talking about, I like how you pictured that. So like all the different gland, like a biologist is gonna kick the door down and just fucking blast me in the face for saying this dumb shit. But so the cerebral spinal fluid, and you're saying like every gland kind of spritzes their fucking chemical juice in there, and
Yeah.
you create like a cocktail.
Yep.
And when they all
Like
mix
a freaking
together,
battery.
right? Yeah, they all mix
And
together, and they're right.
it expands these ventricles, because it's like you're stimulating it first with the electrical sensation, but later on it's actually like it's running like fluids, like constantly up and down, up and down.
And that's why you say like a battery, because it has a positive and negative
Yes.
pole, and it creates that.
And that battery can extend the state of being in that sort of hemisync or like energized situation. And the Kriya Yoga tradition and the Kundalini claims in Kundalini Upanishad say that you can live immortally in your physical body if you take this really far.
Shit.
I think there's more to it, but they are saying that. I'm just saying that's the claim.
deep.
That's the claim.
Babji, Babaji,
I'm
he's
like,
able to.
I don't know. I'm like 10% in maybe. So I feel like I'm,
Put a couple coins on.
I feel like I'm like pretty excited about the end result. I just, I don't know what it's going to take to get all the way, but I'm going, baby.
Immortality.
You gotta invest a little bit of cash in that sector for sure. 10% of my funds to the yoga, but no, that's a really cool way to visualize it. Like you said, don't get hooked up on the scientific explanation, but that does help people understand it and bring that energy up, baby, and that'll increase your Merkaba field. But for this, so it's talking. I was not expecting this whatsoever. It's talking about drawing up the energy and creating a acoustic standing wave, and that your heartbeat is part of that prime resonance pattern that creates a standing wave in the ventricles in your brain. Like, ooh, that gave me the chills when I saw it. I feel it right now.
Yeah.
And it's really cool. So we read a lot from the Keys of Enoch, and they are the actual they're the Academy for Future Science, and they have these cool experiments that they do. And one of the experiments, it has to do with cells, cytoplasm, organelles, mitochondria, and microtubules. I hope you guys understood everything I just said then. But so pretty much a cell has a nucleus, and it has mitochondria, the powerhouse of the cell, has a cell wall, that outer wall of the cell, and inside is a bunch of jelly called cytoplasm. The Academy of Future Science figured out that that jelly, that cytoplasmic jelly, is also, the cell also has an electromagnetic gradient that runs from north to south. And it can change its polarity along the outside. And when it does this, it crystallizes the jelly. They call it liquid crystal. It's weird. So, and all the organelles on the inside, like if you were to go with the super tiny microscope, electron microscope, and see the surface of a mitochondria, it's full of a bunch of holes. Same with the cellular wall, as a bunch of holes. These are tubes. This is how nutrients come in and out of cells and organelles. These are called microtubules, and they analyze, I think, the cell wall or the wall of an organelle, and it says that it can, at the very edge of the tubes, they are picking up different resonance fields. So every microtubule can adjust its resonance frequency at will. So the cell can adjust its entire matrix of acoustic resonance and electromagnetic resonance. I guess the microtubes are actually giving off an acoustic vibration, so acoustic signatures. So the cell, when it needed to do different functions, it would reshape its acoustic field, and the cytoplasm would become rigid, like a snowflake. So if it needed to do one process, it would look like a certain snowflake, and then it would switch itself when it needs to do a different process, and you'd see the cytoplasm, the liquid jelly, go into a different formation. And this would crystallize the cell, so the organelles would have different highways to do different functions, and it had all these template patterns to put the jelly inside the cell in different somatic forms, I guess we would say, if we're talking somatics, within its own electromagnetic structure and acoustic harmonic standing wave structure, somatics. And so that's jelly in a cell. Now let's extrapolate that and talk about cerebral spinal brain fluid. And this is talking about that you can create standing waves within the cytoplasm in the cell can restructure itself into that liquid crystal state where the jelly is different rigid structures, like different Merkabas, different mandalas, different snowflakes. Maybe with the right thought and the right heartbeat pattern, you can also do this with your brain fluid, because your brain is sitting in a vat of brain juice in your skull. So with your hemispheres, you can start to reshape and restructure the brain fluid, which would be the equivalent to the cytoplasm in a cell.
That's
If
really
that makes sense.
interesting. Yeah, you actually gave me a thought. You gave me a cybernetic ideograph.
There you go.
The later on in this document, we'll get there, but it talks about holographic theory, and we'll get into this idea of the brain as a hologram, kind of. And it almost makes me think, if you are creating a standing wave in some kind of somatic pattern, standing wave in the brain, it could be focalizing like a perfectly balanced thought pattern in your mind, and maybe that's what allows you to like step out of your body or something like that, or like focus your thoughts out of your body into another direction or something like that. It's really interesting.
Only if all the fluid in every cytoplasm in every cell is at the perfect rigid geometric form. So that means your entire bioelectric field has to be in the right superposition, disposition.
The entire body in perfect harmony. It's pretty cool.
Yep. So I will read from the Keys of Enoch real quick, just 2 paragraphs. I don't know if you want to show the people on this right here, but it's from Key 313. Key 313. Key 313, paragraph 6. And on the PDF, it's page 236. But yeah, I'll actually do it from part 5 for the people. So this is from the Keys of Enoch. I think has a lot to do with what we're talking about here. It says that the key tells us that there is an arc of light over the third eye, which controls all the basic neuron activity of the pineal gland. This arc of light comes in through the third eye because the third eye pineal gland area controls all of the light synthesis connected with the cerebral cortex. Man knows from biochemical research that the cerebral cortex, when injected with an enzyme of serotonin, will move slightly and rotate slowly, releasing tremendous phosphine patterns. That's all I wanted to read from the Keys. It's just talking about something similar to what we're saying right now, that standing wave that gets created with your heartbeat under certain breathing conditions and certain thought waves will create the jelly in your brain to restructure itself somatically in a certain way. And that the ventricles and the harmonics from the left and right hemisphere have a lot to do with that. So I just wanted to pull from the Keys to kind of, it also iterates that the hemispheres also rotate and become adjusted to that standing harmonic wave in the brain. If you, I guess, do the gateway process.
Yeah.
Let's keep it going.
That's
Unless
really
you got
cool.
something.
JJ Herchak with those pineal gland secrets.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I guess if we want to take a quick glance at these figures here.
Oh yeah, we didn't even look at those, huh?
Yeah,
by figures, do you mean UFO videos?
Oh, I'm saving those for later. Don't worry.
Okay, so
get them up.
What's okay?
Are they up?
Humunculus.
Yeah, it's the text is a little hard to read. I
Is
don't
that
know
a person with his hand in the brain? What is that?
What you looking at, bro? What are you looking at?
It's showing the body parts.
The pictures on the previous page.
Oh yeah, in the gateway document. Yeah, it was just what you were reading. Sandwiched in between those paragraphs was the 3 figures referenced elsewhere from what we read.
This is a disturbing picture. What the fuck is going on? It
kind of is. It's showing the body parts assigned to.
Okay, that's weird. I thought it was someone like reaching into someone's brain. I was like, that's
weird.
Yeah,
right. It's kind of creepy looking, but it's like hip, knee, ankle, toes. Each have like a different little section of a lobe in your brain, and this is like a frontal cross section. If I understand this,
why is there a face sticking out on the
That's
very
like
front?
Your face is. It's a weird ass illustration to show your face is being processed in that little pocket on the brain right there.
That's what he's saying. The different centers of the brain dictate to that body part. So I guess that's part of the face.
That was his way.
I can see.
Yeah.
There's a cross section there of third and lateral ventricles, and then you see some arrows flowing up and down. It says I can't read that. Thermal, dermal, something, signal in out. Then at the top it says polarization of gray matter causes progression of symptoms. Stimulus loop, so I guess that's showing like a flow going through. Oh, so that's as you're visualizing your body parts through meditation, maybe it's stimulating like sequentially each region of your brain.
Oh, interesting. That's trippy.
I can't read that small text there. I can see here though, figure B, the motor and sensory cortex and the third and lateral. I think that's just laying it out so you get a good visualization. Frontal lobe, third ventricles in the middle there. Motor cortex, sensory cortex, lateral ventricles. And then figure C shows a view of the third and lateral ventricles in context of associated brain structure. That's just more,
Doesn't a ventricle mean like a hollow structure or something like that?
Does it? I guess we should look it up.
Yeah, a hollow part, a cavity.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So that's filled with the brain juice. So that's what they're talking about, cymatically adjusting, just like the cell does on a cellular level.
Oh, so that's maybe why the first illustration A is showing like kind of the folds,
the chambers.
Are those the ventricles maybe?
Those are the ventricles. So we got hollow parts in the middle of our brain filled with juice.
Wow, interesting.
Here's a weird Kundalini technique that's written about in these ancient texts that I also practice. It's the what do they call it? You stick your tongue upwards.
Oh yeah, you told me about that. Yeah.
I'm blanking on the name.
It's like a mudra where you you put your tongue in your nose or something like that.
Let me look it up. Tongue mudra.
Tongue and nose mudra.
Kekari mudra tongue lock. So yeah, in the Eastern practices, they have these what they call mudras and bantas, which are like different ways that you pressurize your body. And again, like I said, this is working somewhat on the organ system, and it's changing your blood flow. Even like crunching your hands like this, it means that when the blood like gets to there, it kind of like bounces back faster because this is like clench. It's harder to like get out to the very fingers.
Oh.
So just think of that. The body is a closed pressure system. So mudras and bantas are forcing that pumping of the blood into different pressurized areas. And so one of these called Kekari mudra is actually inserting the tongue into the nasal passage. And if you were to just try that, you go, how is that possible? Well, the frenulum is the thing that keeps, it's that little skin between. I was about to say,
that's the only thing that
prevents you from doing that. And so you basically have to either stretch it, or in the ancient text, they actually give a method on how to cut it, which is not recommended. I will say I cannot suggest that to anyone, but I will say that the crazy Kundalini people will possibly try that. And it is because this is, again, this is not medical advice. This is, you do so anything like that, you do at your own risk. I mean, I guess you could get it surgically done. But at the end of the day, I'll tell you, I didn't do it, but I still just use the normal method of like, it stretches it over time. You just have to do it over time. How is it worth it?
Like,
here's what it does. Here's what the result is. By inserting the tongue, so just by keeping the tongue to the top of the mouth, it would change how you breathe. However, Kekari is more than that, in that you're actually stimulating the brain centers by sticking your tongue up the nasal passage, because you're putting pressure into, that's like a direct underside access, like soft tissue to the brain, where you're kind of like squeezing the glands, you know what I'm saying?
Oh,
and so
that makes me
that's
cringe.
part of it. That's part of it. The other part of it is that when your tongue is a muscle, when you stretch
your brain,
when you stretch the muscle in that way, again, it creates, I guess, a motion or a tension around the neck area, even around the spine, and that influences the flow of the electric sensation and the fluids in the cerebrospinal fluid. And at the start of practicing that, you won't necessarily feel what's happening, but later on, it will be more obvious. And so I use it. It's has legitimate like results in the context of the Kundalini process. It's actually, I have a book that claims that you can use this method to influence your brainwave states, and that in some meditations that deal with deeply extended states of unconsciousness, it's necessary to have your tongue in that position in order to like make sure you can wake back up, you could say. I know that I don't know if I explained that right. So what I'm suggesting is that like, okay, let's say that this method sort of like alters this hemisync process, the electrical stuff. Could you use this to remain in that sort of stasis mode and stay at a body longer? Because there's always this thing where you like get pulled back to your body. You're like time limited somehow. So what exactly is that? What causes the limit on that time? Part of it might be that your body can kind of run on itself. Like when you fall asleep, it keeps it breathing, kind of keeps that system going. But when your consciousness, I guess, is fully out of body, there's sort of a question of like, well, if that core like energy is somewhat leaving, like, is there a possibility that it could get disconnected? And I think that naturally it kind of always pulls you back. But in these techniques, what you're doing is sort of mastering the full potential. So I think that you can use them to do some next level stuff. And if it deals with like keeping your body in a state of suspended animation or electrically charged in a specific manner to like optimize these experiences, then that's your explanation. That's your scientific explanation on what's happening. I can't exactly explain yet, how that can affect it, but you can use that technique, and it's pretty interesting, even though it sounds weird on the surface. It does actually begin to make sense.
Well, as you were describing it, dude, I was putting my tongue at the roof of my mouth as far back as I can, and you can kind of feel the curvature where it starts getting into your navel cavity, but I can't really get in there. But it's really sensitive there. All the nerves around that area are sensitive, and I'd feel the tingly directly into like my brain. And I was like, okay, shit. So like, what you're saying is you gotta get your tongue deep in there and suck out the brain juices, and that's how we get perfect Merkaba.
Might need to get some tongue extensions for that.
Well,
when you eat crawfish and you like chew off their head and suck the juice.
Oh yeah. Hey,
talking
about ASMR, there's those like mukbang ASMR videos of the Korean women eating crawfish boils, pull apart crawfish, and apparently that'll really send some tingles up your spine.
I think we're onto something here.
I am not into mukbang videos. Thank you very much.
All right.
Only
so when D-Bake is saying, the last thing I'll add there is D-Bake is talking about, suck the brain juices. But what actually is described in these techniques is that the gland usage going up the spine goes into the brain. Some of it is like used and processed, and then it's sent back down the left side of the body, and then it gets sort of reprocessed again, and then sent back up. And so they say that this cycle creates like in the old text they use the term nectar as in like a sort of magical substance, but now in terms of modern biology, I think we kind of understand this as like a combination of these gland secretions like all across the body, and possibly creating some unknown things that are not seen in modern biology because this is a sort of obscure thing that doesn't just happen naturally, I guess. And so by putting the tongue up there, it actually also changes the secretion I guess, the downward flow of the secretion, and helps influence it to get it to the heart, because it says that there's also an important process when these gland secretions reach the heart on the downward flow, and that this is also a very important process in terms of the human potential, extending the longevity of the body. And I think the Keys of Enoch probably talks about something like that as well, about gland systems and the heart, and the relation to Kundalini. So that's that's kind of they call it a secret science, the secret science.
That's interesting. It would be cool to see some studies done with, very legit biologists observing some professional Kriya Yoga masters who can actually do these techniques and try to take samples of that nectar produced from their
Oh, you're trying to take
gland
samples?
systems.
You're
Yeah,
trying
they could do, like an analysis of that.
trying to crack open the brain and take the
I don't know how you
You
could.
G over
freaking
here.
reptilian, you reptile. No, it'd be interesting.
Chromatics.
Yeah, it'd be interesting. I don't know. Sometimes there's a weird thing that happens when you get like esoteric things involved with science. I mean, eventually somebody's got to do it. It can get kind of weird if there's not the right type of sincerity.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, a lot of times what happens is they're like, whoa, we see these meditators can go into this brainwave state, and it's interesting that they can do this on command. And then it just kind of ends there. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
what do you need that as proof? Like, just go do the thing and experience it.
Or like people describing when someone goes into a religious trance, like speaking in tongues or something, and they'll say a certain part of the brain lights up. So some will use that as an argument to say, oh, you can see the region that lights up, so obviously the religious experience is caused by the brain, so it's
Sure.
scientists will come to their science conclusions. Well, all right. I'll go ahead and jump into this next section here, biofeedback.
Yeah, this is going to be like a multi-part episode.
Yeah.
It's going to have to be.
We're 6 pages in and an hour and a half in to the episode.
Yeah. Yeah, we could do maybe one more round.
That's cool, dude. For Forbidden Scrolls, we drop parts, and that's not no big deal.
Oh, dude, people are here for the knowledge that comes out of reacting to these things. So
exactly,
they could read this on their own anytime, but they can't hear us to react to it anytime.
That's right.
Yeah, exactly. Make all these connections and okay.
All right.
Who's it next to you?
Biofeedback, the third consciousness altering methodology, which will be briefly described as biofeedback. Biofeedback is somewhat unique in that it actually employs the self-cognitive powers of the left hemisphere to gain access to such areas of the right brain as the lower cerebral, motor, and sensory cortices, and assorted pain or pleasure centers. Instead of suppressing the left hemisphere as is done in hypnosis, or largely bypassing and ignoring it as is done in transcendental meditation, biofeedback teaches the left hemisphere first to visualize the desired result and then to recognize the feelings associated with the experience of successful right hemisphere access to the specific lower cerebral cortex, pain or pleasure or other areas in the manner needed to produce the desired result. Special self-monitoring devices such as the digital thermometer are used to inform the left brain when it succeeds in keying the right hemisphere into accessing the appropriate area. Once this is done, the left brain can then repeatedly instruct the right brain to reestablish the pathways involved so as to produce the same external objective measures of success. In this way, the pathways are strengthened and emphasized to such an extent that left brain consciousness is enabled to access appropriate areas in the right brain using a conscious demand mode. For example, if the subject wishes to increase the circulation in the left leg in order to speed up healing, he may concentrate with his left brain on achieving that result while carefully monitoring a digital thermometer connected to the left leg. When the concentrated effort begins to achieve success, the digital thermometer will register an increase in the temperature of the left leg. At that point, the subject can mentally, left brain, associate the sensations experienced with the result achieved and can begin to emphasize by memory recall. The same process calls it strengthening by affirmation and repetition. In this way, pain can be blocked, healing can be enhanced, malignant tumors can apparently be suppressed and ultimately destroyed. The body's pleasure centers can be stimulated, and a variety of specific physiological results may be achieved. In addition, biofeedback may be used to greatly accelerate achievement of deep meditative states, particularly for beginners who have no experience in meditative techniques and whose progress in that methodology is enhanced through effective visualization and external objective affirmation. Display of the subject's brainwave pattern on a cathode ray tube has proven to be a laboratory-validated means by which subjects may quickly learn to place themselves in profoundly relaxed states characterized by the sort of quietude and singularity of mental focus associated with advanced meditation.
All right. I'm starting to get the feel like this is a new ager that's trying to sell this to the intelligence.
Yeah, trying to sell meditation
Like,
to the intelligence.
come on, really, dude? Like, measure your left leg with a digital thermometer to prove that you're. Come on, that's a grasp. That's a stretch.
Hey, but that'd be cool if you could actually watch the temperature rise through your conscious efforts.
Yeah,
you know?
it would be cool. I mean,
Like, come on, military, we need to meditate more.
measure my temperature in my feet. Oh, I'm doing it. It went up 1 degree. Like that. I mean, I don't know if that's such a very good way to, I guess, measure this, but
They're trying their best, dang it.
Yeah, I guess it's the 80s. I thought they'd have better technology than a digital thermometer to test whether or not, like, I'll put a thermometer under my armpit.
Why not just put a mood
Like,
put a mood ring on to let you know when you're psychic enough?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like, look at the mood rate
Mood
changes.
ring.
That's it. Yeah, exactly. So I don't know. I dig it. I can dig it. I'd rather him be on the spiritual side trying to push it as an officer, but it's fun to
Right.
read. Let's do it.
He's a
Oh, my
commander,
turn.
too. Yeah, your
My
turn.
turn, right? Digital thermometer. All right, dude. Sold. Sign me up. Fucking, it's real. That's all we needed the entire time is a digital thermometer.
That sold me. That was the evidence I needed.
Damn. Shut it down, boys. We figured it out. Okay. Gateway and hemisync. Now that we have briefly profiled the basic mechanics of the principal techniques for altering or expanding consciousness, which share some of the objectives and or methods employed in the gateway experience, we may proceed to focus on what that technique actually involves. Fundamentally, the gateway experience is a training system designed to bring enhanced strength, focus, and coherence to the amplitude and frequency of brainwave output between the left and right hemispheres, as to alter consciousness, moving it outside the physical sphere, so as to ultimately escape even the restrictions of time and space. You can tell why the New Agers freak out when they read this. They're like,
Oh, yeah.
Mhm.
you know, it's everything they wanted and more. Coming
Their
from
whole
the
belief
intel.
system validated by one CIA representative.
Yep.
Exactly. Yeah. That's funny. And digital thermometers. The participant then gains access to the various levels of intuitive knowledge which the universe offers. What differentiates the gateway experience from forms of meditation is its use of the hemisync technique, which is defined in a monograph by Monroe Institute trainer Melissa Jagger, I don't know, as a state of consciousness defined when the EEG patterns of both hemispheres are simultaneously equal in amplitude and frequency. Although hemisync seems to be rather rare and of only short duration in ordinary human consciousness, Melissa Jagger states that audio techniques developed by Bob Monroe can induce and sustain hemisync with the Institute's basic focus 3 tapes. The basic focus 3 tapes. Because there's like focus 1, focus 2, focus 3, right? Something like that.
We got different stages.
Yeah. She also notes that studies conducted by Elmer and Alice Green at the Menninger Foundation have shown that a subject with 20 years of training in Zen meditation could consistently establish hemisync at will. Interesting. Sustaining it for over 15 minutes. Dr. Stuart Twemlow, a psychiatrist and a research associate of the Monroe Institute, reports that In our studies of the effect of the Monroe tape system on brainwaves, we have found that the tapes encourage the focusing of brain energy. It can be measured as with a light bulb in watts into narrower and narrower frequency bands. This focusing of energy is not unlike the yoga concept of one-pointedness, which we may translate in Western terms as a single-mindedness. Dr. Twemlow goes on to observe that as the individual gets into the tapes beyond focus 3, there is a gradual increase in brainwave size, which is a measure of brain energy or power. And that's pretty cool. So, kind of stuff we already went over, just the synchronization of the two hemispheres, that standing wave somatics.
Yeah.
Pretty
Now
cool.
we got a good solid definition of hemisync moving forward.
Yeah.
Okay, lamp versus laser. Melissa Yeager uses a metaphor to help clarify the process involved in the use of hemisync in a gateway experience. She points out that the human mind in its natural state may be likened to an ordinary lamp, which expends energy in the form of both heat and light, but in a chaotic, incoherent way, which diffuses its energy over a wide area but of rather limited depth. On the other hand, the human mind under the discipline of hemisync acts after the fashion of a laser beam, which produces a disciplined stream of light. The stream of energy is projected with total coherence of both frequency and amplitude, such that the surface area of a laser beam contains billions of times the concentrated energy found in a similar surface area on the sun. Gateway assumes that once the frequency and amplitude of the human brain are rendered coherent, it is possible to begin accelerating both so that the human mind is soon resonating at ever higher vibrational levels. The mind can then bring itself into synchronization with more sophisticated and rarefied energy levels in the universe. The mind, when operating at these increasingly rarefied levels, is assumed to be capable of processing the information thus received through the same fundamental matrix by which it makes sense of ordinary physical sensory input to achieve meaning in a cognitive context. Such meaning is usually perceived visually in the form of symbols, but may also be perceived as astonishing flashes of holistic intuition, or even in the form of scenarios involving both visual and aural perception. The mechanics by which the mind exercises the consciousness function will be addressed in more detail later in this paper. Go ahead, D-Bake, say it.
We know you got some.
Ideographs. Mental images. He's getting one right now.
Oh, yeah. I see him over there pulling up some ideographs.
All right.
I
Oh, you're muted,
I
D-Bake.
lo-
I don't know if you're saying anything. He might be talking to someone else or listening.
Oh, he's telepathizing. That's why he's muted. I'm receiving his transmission. He says he loves this analogy of the lamp versus laser. He's gone. I honestly do love that analogy. Like, a lamp just diffuses energy radiantly, and likewise our mind regularly works spinning energy and it's just diffusing kind of randomly. And then by narrowing your focus, you're harnessing your mental powers towards one concentrated point. The book, The Master Key System, kind of guides you through this process of focusing on your goals, whether those be business goals or otherwise, and hyper focusing on that, like a laser. That book was written in like 1915. They didn't have lasers back then, but it basically kind of gives a similar analogy of the mind. But you can achieve great feats just by planning your life out, having a plan to follow for when you're not mentally in it. You can just follow the plan, and to come up with those plans, you need to enter a state like that where you are in deep contemplation of what you're doing, what direction you're going in, lay out step by step what you need to do. And so even beyond just the gateway process, that's just generally a good thing to do, and your evening time meditation before you go to bed or whatever, just thinking about your goals in life, what you want to do, and hyper focusing on what your plan is or whatever it is, rather than, I guess in meditation, normally you let your mind wander through all the regular thoughts that bubble up from your subconscious, things running through your mind throughout the day. Once you get that out of the way, get it out of the way as fast as you can, maybe like 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever, then you can finally address what's most important. I think that's how Jesus was able to figure out what God's will is. When you think about like God as infinite intelligence, the entire universe, all knowing, if you can tap into that, you can finally find your place in what direction you need to go in. And through just kind of mindfulness, meditation, prayer, you can achieve that. But yeah, that's probably a good stopping point. I don't know if D-Bake's going to jump in last second.
Yeah, this has a couple more other points here in this numbering system. So, yeah, I think you and I can kind of outro here. I mean, we don't even need like an official outro, or I guess we can.
Yeah.
Because it'll be a part 2. So, thank you everyone for watching. Thank you for sticking around the tangents, the knowledge drops, the info dumps, the TEDx talks, the round table of Triosophy, the Brotherhood, the Legacy Foundation for Human Progress has brought you this transmission. Take it away.
Yeah. We'll see you next time.
See you
Part
next time,
2.
baby.